We've met Theseus, the hero of Athens, in a couple of places already. We saw him in a very tragic role in Euripides' play, The Hippolytus, and we encountered his father, Aegeus, in the Medea of Euripides, who gets rather, shall one say, hornswoggled into providing a safe haven for Medea. Now I want to focus on this important figure in both general mythology and particularly the Athenian consciousness. We see him a lot in Athenian red figure pottery. We're going to see some examples of that in a few moments. And obviously a lot in Athenian literature. The tragedians are all Athenians, and we'll see the way he interacts and appears in these plays. His feats are very similar to many that Heracles did, and so one does see perhaps a little bit of an appropriation by the Athenians of the older stories and legends about Heracles. In the 5th century, after the Persian Wars, one of the things that the politician, aristocrat, great general Cimon does is to bring back the bones of Theseus from the island of Skyros. This is clearly a very loaded act. It's also the return and the magnification of the story of Theseus. It does have a lot to do with the rising Athenian consciousness of the new democracy as well. He's associated with the sun oikismos, the unification of Attica, the region that Athens controls. In Euripides' play, The Heracles, which, alas, we didn't have time to read, he plays an extraordinarily important role. When Heracles has been brought low in his madness and lies on the stage, spattered with the blood of his family, which in his madness he had slaughtered, it's Theseus who comes and lifts him up against Heracles' urging, because after all he's covered with the polluting blood, the miasma of his own family. But it's Theseus who says, "You're my friend, and friends cannot pollute their friends," and takes him to Athens to purify him. This also has, clearly an element of Athenian pride and self-consciousness. In the Oedipus at Colonus, we read the Oedipus the King, the last play that Sophocles wrote, age 90, was the Oedipus at Colonus, and there it's Theseus that is the great helper of Oedipus. In the legends, the myths of the Seven against Thebes, he does participate in the march on Thebes to ensure that the burial of the fallen will take place. So what we're seeing here is the integration of legends that create this wonderful figure of patriotism and pride for the Athenians. As befits a hero, he has a remarkable birth. Aegeus went to Delphi, as you remember from the Medea of Euripides, and asked why he was childless, and the oracle assured him that he would be a father, but that he shouldn't open the wineskin until he returned home. So he stops at his friend Pythias' house and explains this oracle, this riddlesome oracle, and Pythias figures it out at once. That means don't have sexual intercourse until you get home. In fact, what Pythias does is he puts Aegeus in bed with his own daughter, wanting this particularly felicitous union, and indeed that does conceive a child. The same night, however, she also couples with Poseidon, because a hero like Theseus needs a god in the lineage. And so, as you remember from the Hippolytus, he can call upon his father Poseidon to do him the favor, as it turned out, a tragic favor of fulfilling the curse that Theseus had laid upon his son Hippolytus. Aegeus leaves some baby gifts with Mother Aithra, sandals and a sword under a great rock, and tells her that when the little boy has grown to manhood and can lift that enormous rock, then he's ready to come to Athens. After that, Theseus does indeed make his way to Athens, all along the way doing great deeds and clearing the road of villains and wild beasts. Note, by the way, when we talk about the connection with Poseidon, that the Aegean Sea seems to be named after Aegeus, and of course that's the sea into which Aegeus himself will hurl himself after the mistaking the news about Theseus's venture with the Minotaur. But that sea connection is clearly very strong in the mythology. And here you can see the story of Theseus lifting the great rock is embedded already in ancient art. This is a Roman relief carving from the 1st century of our era. His labors are heroic, not quite like the 12 of Heracles, but impressive. He defeats Periphetes, the club wielder, and notice there that we have the association with the club of Heracles. Then there's the evil pine bender Cenis and the Crommian sow. Remember there that Heracles had to bring the Erymanthian boar back to Athens, back to Argos, to King Eurystheus, who was commanding him to fulfill these labors. He slays Scyron, who had perverted hospitality and was killing guests, and he out-wrestles Cercyon, who had been out-wrestling and killing others, and he slays Procrustes, who had the awful habit of making the guests that he captured lie on his bed. If they were too long for the bed, he would cut them to size. If they were too short, he would stretch them to fit exactly. And here we have a grand calyx, Athenian drinking vessel, with many of the labors of Theseus on it. We're going to look at some of these in detail right now. Here is Periphetes, the club bearer, and Theseus is dispatching him with a calyx, a large wine drinking vessel, and that's the end of that. And here is our hero dispatching the Crommionian sow. A hero needs to be a great athlete. Theseus is a great wrestler, and puts an end to Cercyon's predations of passers-by, forcing them to wrestle with him and then slaying them. This time Theseus out-wrestles him and puts an end to the villain's life. And the pine bender, who would either fling his guests up into the air, shot there by the springy pine tree, or in some versions tear them apart in the process. Here Theseus is serving him with his own pine tree. So he comes to Athens and just in time to meet his new stepmother, Medea, who immediately tries to get him killed by the bull of Marathon. Once again, remember that Heracles had a similar exploit with that same bull. That doesn't work, so then she tries to poison him. That doesn't work either. And that finally persuaded the gullible Aegeus to throw this woman out of Athens. A little later, the 50 sons of Pallas, the Palantides, try to overthrow Aegeus and Theseus, and Theseus just kills them all. But arguably his most famous exploit is the slaying of the Minotaur. The Athenians had grossly offended, in fact, in a criminal way, King Minos of Crete. Minos' son, Androgeus, had won the Panathenaic Games at Athens, and the Athenians jealously, rather conspired in his death. Minos made war against Athens and laid siege to it, and Zeus punished the city by sending plague, and the oracle told the Athenians that they had to do whatever Minos asked if they wanted to escape the punishment of Zeus. And he demanded that every 9 years they select 7 boys and 7 girls to be fed to the Minotaur, this half-man, half-bull creature. More on that in just a moment. And here we get some very interesting family relations. Let's back up a moment. Minos who was king of Crete, was one of the sons of Zeus and Europa. Remember, Zeus, in the form of a bull, takes Europa to Crete, and there resumes his normal shape and fathers children with her. And one of those children was King Minos. Another one whom you met, I think you met in the Iliad, was Sarpedon. At any rate, then, Minos marries a woman called Pasiphae, who is, as you remember from the Odyssey, the sister of Circe, and as you'll recall from the Medea, also a sister of Aeetes, the king who holds the golden fleece until Medea and Jason steal it. Have that complex family history there. Well, Poseidon was angry at Minos. Minos was supposed to sacrifice a particular bull to Poseidon, and he didn't want to do it. So Poseidon cursed Pasiphae with lust for the bull, and Daedalus, the great inventor and artificer, built her a wooden cow so she could climb inside and have intercourse with the bull. I think I reminded you at the beginning of the term that some Greek mythology is pretty unsavory, and this is a pretty good example of that. Well, what comes forth from this untoward union is the Minotaur, half man and half bull. And since it is Minos' child, he can't exactly dispatch it, although, interestingly enough, in other Greek stories we hear about children being exposed, but this one obviously escaped that. So he has Daedalus create the labyrinth, this great maze, to house the Minotaur. And as I was saying, after the treachery to his son Androgeus, Minos is able to extract the 7 maidens and 7 youths to be fed to the Minotaur. Theseus, the great hero, says no. Kind of like the Hunger Games when Katniss Everdeen says, I'll go in place of my sister to the Hunger Games. Well, here Theseus says, I'm going. Aegeus is really horrified at this because he thinks he'll never see his son again. I thought you might like some pictures. Here's Daedalus, the great artificer, who has made this model cow for Pasiphae to crouch inside. And there she is receiving the work of Daedalus. And here, perhaps, the weirdest Greek vase painting that I, in my career as a classicist, have ever seen. It could be entered into the ultimate ugly baby contest. There is Pasiphae with her little Minotaur sitting upon her knee before it gets stowed away in the labyrinth. And here we have Theseus doing in the Minotaur, more on how it was that he happened to get a sword into the labyrinth in a moment. And here a much older vase painting, this one from Boeotia, not an Athenian vase painting, which shows how widespread these legends were before they really got co-opted by the Athenians and turned into the story of their national hero. The Minotaur makes a cameo appearance in Dante's Inferno. There he is in hell as Virgil and Dante walk past. For those of you who enjoy Ford's Thursday Next series, the Minotaur also makes an appearance there, but enough of that for now. So how does Theseus get out of this jam? The daughter of Minos and Pasiphae, Princess Ariadne, falls in love with him. She gives him a sword and a ball of thread so that he can make his way out of the labyrinth. In some versions, Theseus wins with unarmed combat, as the great athlete that he was. Theseus takes Ariadne and her sister Phaedra with him in his escape. But then it's a little unclear the different stories, different versions of the myth. He abandons Ariadne on the island of Naxos. Was it by the command of Athena so that she could become the bride of Dionysus, or was it out of cruelty? There are different myths about this. And then he forgets to change the sails on his boat. Aegeus had said, I just can't bear this. If you're coming back alive, put white sails on the boat, not the black sails, the sails of death, with which you sailed out to Crete. Theseus forgets. Aegeus, looking out over the waters, sees the black sails and hurls himself to his death. Of course, this means Theseus becomes then the king of Athens. Well, Daedalus has a few things to explain the help he gave to Theseus and to Ariadne, and before that to Pasiphae. He's locked in the labyrinth with his son Icarus, but being the inventor that he is, he creates wings to fly away. He warns Icarus, his son, not to fly too high because the wings are made of wax and feathers, and Icarus disobeys. He flies too high. The sun melts the wax. The feathers fall, as does Icarus, into the sea where he drowns. And here a vase painting of Theseus being led away by Hermes, whom you can see all the way over on the right-hand side of the vase, and leaves the poor sleeping princess there abandoned. And here, perhaps in a more sanctifying version of this, Theseus is being more or less forced away by Athena. There's poor Ariadne sleeping, a smile on her face, and Theseus seeming to argue with the goddess, but those sorts of pleas are not acceptable to a goddess, and off he goes, but unwilling. Now there's a dark side to Theseus. He takes the Amazon queen as his wife. That's Antiope, or better known as Hippolyta. We see that name in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream as well, which celebrates the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta. But he abandons her for Phaedra and kills her in a fight. And as you'll remember, it is Phaedra who is cursed by Aphrodite with lust for Hippolytus, Theseus's son, her stepson. And this will, of course, lead to Hippolytus' death and Theseus's great grief. In another exploit, he kidnaps Helen. This is before she becomes the wife of Menelaus. In another myth, he tries to help Pirithous steal Persephone from the underworld. Talk about arrogance. They're both imprisoned down there, but Heracles, in his exploit in the underworld, rescues Theseus. And he comes to a rather sad end. Castor and Pollux, who are the brothers of Helen, rescue her and restore her to Sparta. They put Menestheus on the throne of Athens while Theseus is trapped in the underworld. He's ultimately exiled to Skyros, where King Lycomedes kills him. So a rather anticlimactic and sad end to the great hero of Athens. And one can see here the mixing of different legends and different myths that will all go into the composite figure that becomes the great hero of Athens, but without forgetting that rather ambivalent side of his character.